Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Knicks Film School Pregame Show. My name is Andrew Claudio, a.k.a. GMAC, and it is time to preview another Knicks matchup, this time on Sunday night, finally back home at Madison Square Garden against the New Orleans Pelicans, the Knicks' 5-game road trip that apparently all the players felt was very long, and they were very ready to get home, as probably evident by their performance in Charlotte on Saturday and that matinee in North Carolina. The Knicks will be back home at MSG, and they welcome in a Pelicans team that last year was top 7 in net rating. I kept looking throughout the season at how good they were and wondering what this is and what this ceiling might be. You know, we follow the advanced page on NBA.com a ton when we evaluate teams and how good you are and where you are in offense, and where you are in defense, and all of the above. And the Pelicans, this 49-win team, borderline 50-win team, They just kept performing last year. And then this year, the injury bug seems to have really hit them. If you are just tuning in and are unaware, they're going to play this game without Zion Williamson, without Brandon Ingram, without Jose Alvarado, without Herb Jones, without Jordan Hawkins. They do now have Trey Murphy III. Old friend Elfrid Payton is back on the roster getting rotation minutes. And I feel bad because my guest for today, I always try to steer clear of the how are things health-wise with the team, but it's the story of the Pelicans' 4-16 start to the season. So once again, and I hope one of these days we come here and it's a full bill of health, but we'll see what happens in the future. Joining me for this edition of the Knicks Film School Pregame Show from the In the Know podcast, Mr. Mason Ginsberg. Mason, how are you on this Sunday, sir?
You know, repping the one team I got that's done something in the last month that's notable. But yeah, you summed it up eloquently. It's hard to sum that up very quickly given the number of names you've got to go through with the Pelicans who are out. That for a lot of the season they had pretty much a playoff caliber rotation, all not playing. And so They're not far off with that right now.
I mean, look, Zion, Brandon Ingram, Alvarado, Herb Jones, and Jordan Hawkins would be like the 7th seed in the Eastern Conference right now. So yeah. I don't even know if it's close to say that it's like you have a playoff roster on your injured reserve right now. And I feel bad. And I sent you the rundown. And the first question is like, I feel like every time he's here, I'm asking about availability and how is it tough to get a read on this team when you don't know who's going to be available. Like I have questions about Willie Green, but I don't know. I can't look at their net rating and their offensive rating and defensive rating and say, oh, I have an idea of what this team is because of what's happened with the injuries this year. So if I can go to the state of the Pelicans question, I mean, how wearing is it on you as a content creator? And then like on the fan base that here we are years into this and it's still a conversation about availability.
Yeah, I mean, this season feels a lot like the AD trade request season in that we're coming off a great year. I mean, in that year, 2018, that's when the Pelicans swept the Blazers, and we're thinking, all right, we got something to play for this next year, and that's different circumstances. Obviously, the Pelicans in 2019 they underperformed a little bit, but they weren't doing terribly, and then AD signs a clutch, asks out. And so here we are this year where the Pelicans had, like you said, almost a 50-win season last year. The team was as healthy as they've been in some time. Zion played 70 games or something like that. And I mean, the team looked good. And of course, in the play-in, Zion hurts his hamstring and they go from being a potential, a fun, trendy upset pick to saying, oh no, they got no shot here. Yeah, and here we are this year, and the injury wheels have fallen off the bus once again. And ironically, so my co-host on In the Know, Schmidt, he just released yesterday that is Brandon Ingram. We may talk about it, but he switched to agency. He is switching representation, and the rumor is that he will be signing with Clutch Sports.
Of course he will.
So like I said, a lot of similarities to that 2019, the season after the Blazers sweep when AD asked out.
So then let's go even further with this, because there's a question in here about from one of our main contributors, Busy. For the real though, is the Pelicans tanking or not? Because I need to know for fantasy purposes. Fantasy questions aside, like this is supposed to be a generational draft that's upcoming, and the Pelicans, I mean, they have their pick and the Lakers pick this year. Is the Lakers picks officially been used up already. So what's their pick situation?
Yeah, so that pick went to the Hawks in the DeJounte Murray trade. It was basically that pick and Dyson Daniels. That was effectively the trade. And so that is gone. However, they do have the Bucks pick top 4 protected, and that pick that's gone from it's gone to half the freaking league at this point.
It went through the Knicks. Yeah, it got traded from the Knicks to the what's it called? To the Nets in the Mikal Bridges trade, which going well so far, I'll say.
So the Pelicans still own that pick of its top 4, which 2 or 3 weeks ago with Milwaukee, it looked like, oh, maybe this could be something. But anyway, to the point of what to expect here. I don't know, because I will tell you that this season is feeling, being in the Western Conference, this season is feeling a little too far gone at this point. And it's so ironic because the one thing the Pelicans had that was uncertain coming into the season was the center position after Jonas left. And now Yves Missi is kind of like the bright spot in the season, their first round draft pick. So I think you'll see a lot of minutes from him throughout the season at this point. The thing is, like, with the Pelicans, they're going to have to make a move because they're over the tax right now. And the way the season's gone, they haven't paid the tax ever. They're one of like 2 teams that never paid it. There's no reason to pay it now. And so we know that there's going to be a move to get on there. And so beyond that, who knows? I mean, like, I think this team hopefully is realistic in what's going on here. But I think it's a little too early to say for sure. But I do think you'll see some moves coming, trade wise, and so I think they will try to get your young guys more minutes here.
So I do promise that at some point in this conversation, Mason, we're going to talk about the game today. We're going to talk about on the court. We're going to talk about basketball. Yeah. But I think you've kind of led me down the road of the transactional side of this, because you just said they need to make a move. I think my question is twofold, and it's what move is that? I mean, I know they've been trying to trade Brandon Ingram for a while now. You could probably speak to how realistic a Brandon Ingram trade could potentially be. Like, I'm coming from the world where all summer I was like, Julius Randle is valuable to the Knicks, and they're probably going to extend him and then use him in a big trade in the future. And then I was almost right, because they did use it for the big trade. They just didn't extend him, and they got Karl-Anthony Towns out of it. But I mean, what's the move that you see happening? What's the move you want to see happening? And a obligatory follow-up, like, where does Zion fall in those obligatory moves that potentially could happen?
Yeah, so, Schmidt and I have talked on our pod a lot about this, and it's always been Brandon Ingram's the guy who's going to go, because, like, he's not with the money he wants, he's not the franchise cornerstone that Zion can be when he's healthy. And so,
right.
He also Schmidt's not usually a newsbreaker, but he did have a couple nuggets. And the second thing he did find out was that it sounds like there was a Brandon Ingram Utah Jazz trade very far down the road. I don't know if it was the offseason or somewhere. I think offseason, but he didn't want to go to Utah. He wanted to extend in Utah, and so that kind of shut it down. And so I do think the Ingram move is going to come. And unless his new representation comes to him and says, "Look, the money's not there. Your best chance might be to re-sign with New Orleans." Possible. But I think regardless, he's still the most likely guy to move. But I think the newest injury with Zion, after coming into camp, healthiest he's been by all accounts, and how way the season's gone so far, I think this is the first time we've talked about you got to consider moving both those guys. I mean, they've got a lot of young talent that they can build around with Herb Jones, Trey Murphy, Yves Missi now. I just think that anything's on the table at this point, which I don't think I was saying as recently as the offseason.
Well, so the Zion part of it, it's been a long road of you and I talking about Zion Williamson on this podcast. Yep. From, can the Knicks trade for him? Can the Knicks, like, is he still mad that he went to New Orleans over New York on draft night? You clarifying how much he has embraced the city, and, how some of it is media driven, to the latest report about him leaving CAA. And, our very own Chris Persianen saying some of it was driven by him not being moved to the Knicks by his representation, to like the availability questions and wondering, is it worth like investing in Zion Williamson, to last season where he plays 70 games and looks incredible, until once again, the play-in that you alluded to earlier, where I remember watching it live, like in the moment saying, oh my gosh, like, this is Zion realized, like this is that Embiid season where he finally showed he could play a full season. And
he dropped 40 in that game.
Right. Yeah. And then he pulls his hammy and he's out for the rest of the season at that point. And I mean, first, your reaction to the CAA report when it came out, or the report about his divorce with CAA, and just like you mentioned, like the consideration that maybe it is finally time to move on. Like, I don't even know what's equal value, because as you mentioned, he's a franchise cornerstone player when he's healthy. I just don't know if he's ever going to be able to be healthy enough that equal value for a franchise cornerstone when he's healthy is out there, you know?
Yeah, that's the reality. And so we actually also talked about that, the report around like the why behind the CAA breakup. And I I'm a little skeptical around the notion that Zion could have requested a trade at any time. So he never did. And the Pelicans, given the drama behind it, they would have probably accommodated, right? And so that's one thing. And then around there's one other thing in that report around the understanding of his own contract, which if that's true, CAA's got a big problem on their hands, because that's I just, there's such a huge agency beyond sports. I struggle to believe that he didn't know what he was signing up for. Even that would be bad for CAA in the NBA, bad reputationally. So, but as far as where the situation with Zion, you've got to accept that whatever you think is fair value for him, it's so hard with guys like that, like Embiid too, like at this point, because their ceiling is top X player in the NBA, but how often is that realized? It's not often enough, and so you've got to avoid like sunk cost fallacy and just kind of gauge the market, and if you think it's the right time to move him, you move him.
So the Anthony Davis parallels are not lost on me. I'm sure you guys have talked about it on In the Know, but there was very much a like clean slate when the Anthony Davis trade was made, with some availability questions. But I'm sure you agree with this. You had the sample size of that Blazers series, and then him being what he was in the Warriors series in the playoffs, of like, okay, like we've seen what the fully realized version of AD is. And then obviously he signs with Clutch and the rest is history. But then you have the reset button that was hit. And I'm wondering, does the fan base, like, are they trending toward, especially with this draft upcoming, like, hey, let's just hit a reset button and like see what we can get for Zion, see what we can get for Ingram. And I guess this also adds a follow-up. Are the front office and the coach safe if they're going to be doing a reset button? Like, where do things currently stand with the overall structure with New Orleans?
Yeah, I mean, I think the fan base generally is there's almost like throwing up your hands, like what else are you going to do at this point, right?
Gotcha.
Like, whether they want to trade BI and Zion for a bunch of picks and just totally reset, that's not a typical fan. I was talking to my dad the other day, and you kind of remember what the general fan base perspective is. Like, I don't need a title. I just need competitive teams. Like, the hardcore fans want a title, but if you just have a competitive team consistently, that's enough to get the fan base, motivated and interested. And so I don't know what what the fans want the return to be, but I think the openness to moving both those guys is certainly out there. And as far as, no one should be safe. No one. Like, I mean, I think we've had some gripes about Willie Green throughout, and I think it's kind of trended downwards throughout his tenure with New Orleans around, being the guy that really motivated the team in that Phoenix Suns series, which is great. And then, eventually we got to this point where, the Pelicans have the one of, if not the worst shot profiles in the league. They're at a talent deficit, and they're taking a bunch of long twos. They're not getting to the rim. They're not shooting enough threes. And that's been a common problem for the Pelicans throughout. And a lot of that, you can point to someone like Brandon Ingram, who likes to get his shots from mid-range a lot, but it's not just one guy. And so there are, construct questions around the schemes for the Pelicans too. But yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone should be safe if they truly hit the reset button here.
So, quick super chat from Kevin Danishevsky. Curious what Mason thinks about the Zion CAA departure. Kevin, keep watching. We just answered that question. So I appreciate the contribution, Kevin. You clearly just tuned in a little bit late, which is totally fine. I got called out for being late when we first started, apparently. This is another question from Busy. First question, why is GMAC late? We started at 12:31. Apparently, that's too late, Mason. We were way too late. You saw, I got it. My wife walked in and asked a quick question, and I answered it, and then we started. So apologies, Busy. I will ignore my wife on your behalf for the future. All right, man. I want to talk about basketball now, because you've been gracious enough to talk about the transactional part of New Orleans. And I really was so impressed with them last season. The Herb Jones, Trey Murphy combo. We did a ranking before the season, obviously with Anunoby and Bridges, of like where the duo ranks in wing duos. I hate to bring this up, but Dyson Daniels got brought up as a conversation of like what he could potentially be if involved in and then obviously he went to Atlanta, but as a wing duo, and now the Great Barrier Thief looks like he's doing well over in Atlanta. But as far as this matchup goes, and I'm just reading what has happened, but they've lost 7 straight. They've lost 16 of their last 18. Of league average in points per game is 113 points. They've scored more than that 3 times this year, and 3 times in their last 18 games. Again, just reading what has happened so far this year. I promise I'm not trying to rub it in.
Nope.
I guess my question as a Knicks fan who has seen them play down to opponents at times, specifically on Friday against Charlotte, is like when it's looked the best, when it's looked like they can really give a good team a run for their money. How has it looked? What has happened on the court? Like what can Knicks fans look for to see like, oh, if this is happening, then we've got a game tonight?
Man. So there's a lot of reasons it's so hard to answer.
You just went so ponderous into that. I'm sorry.
No, well, one is they've had so many different starting lineups throughout this season that it's hard. There are no trends. Like there haven't been healthy enough to create trends. And so that's why, I mean, so DeJounte's been back for a couple games and he hasn't been great. I mean, he was awesome in that first game of the season before he broke his hand, which was like a super fluke injury. It was I can't remember if he's either defending or shooting a 3 and came down on his wrist, and that was how the injury happened, which is like, you know, classic Pelicans. But I mean, so I think if he starts looking more like himself, first of all, that's one. Trey Murphy is he's the one that the pendulum that kind of swings so far in either direction. Like he can drop 30 or he could have a 5-point night. And so, but again, him and DeJounte are just, you know, getting a few games under their belts coming back from injury. So, I mean, I look at the shot profile again with the Pelicans, just kind of thinking about, are they getting to the rim, which teams have been able to do against the Knicks. So like, that's kind of number one. Knicks don't give up a ton of threes. And so that's going to be a challenge to the Pelicans who are going to keep yelling about them shooting more threes. But when you've got, you know, DeJounte, who will get threes up in volume, CJ McCollum, Trey Murphy, the threes are what come to mind, but I want to see what kind of pressure they can put on the rim. And so I want to see DeJounte Murray in attack mode and really forcing the issue, because he hasn't been much of a scorer in his couple games back. He's rebounded the ball. He's gotten nice assist numbers, but I want to see him kind of be the almost like the number, like start thinking about driving first before passing. And really, I think how he goes is how the team will go. Because again, you got to put, if you want a chance against the Knicks, you got to put you know, pressure on the rim to really, you know, force their defense to react. Because otherwise, they're just going to keep denying 3-pointers against you, and you're going to be you're in tough shape.
Well, it's twofold. You either need to, like you said, put pressure on the rim and just like take advantage of the fact that they don't have a solid rim protector. For as I think it honestly is underrated as Towns has been. I started off this year really focusing on how bad of a rim protector he is. And then you look at some of the deeper analytics. Shout out to my buddy XJ, who
runs big. He's tall.
Well, he's big, but it's like what he does impactfully on the defensive end, rebounding wise. Like it's the Jokic theory, where Jokic is not the greatest rim protector, and you could probably get to the rim, but like you don't make it, you're out of luck, because the rebound will go to the Knicks. And then like the Knicks have done a good job of, as you said, deterring shots at the rim. Like you get to the rim, you have a good shot of making it. But that first line of defense, when it's been solid, it has, you know, mostly worked. But it's twofold. It's either try and get to the rim against the Knicks or hit a ton of threes, because they play a lot of drop. What I'm curious about is a team, as you mentioned, the Pelicans, who likes to get to the rim, but is 28th in 3-point attempts per game. Is there a world where they're bombing away threes because they think that's their better path to winning in this game? Especially, and look, we could just like pivot into Knicks talk at this point. This Mikal Bridges thing is just becoming a thing, and I don't like it. I would love for him to just have a solid game defensively. And I think like I don't even like, it's 19 games. Like you can't overreact too much. It's been somewhat disappointing, but it's been 19 games. The fact that the way this was supposed to work with the Knicks becoming contenders was this first line of defense being awesome. So that way the second line, the back line, I should say, of being Towns, is not, as necessary. And he's just not been the greatest point of attack defender.
Like I said, like,
very weird question in the way I asked it, but you can see I'm very confused by this Mikal Bridges thing, right?
Yeah. And to your question around bombing threes, I mean, the guys they have active right now, that is their pathway to they need to rely on variance, right? Because they don't have enough healthy talent. And so, and to Yves Missy's credit, he's been great on the offensive glass. He's been like no Pelicans fan could have ever predicted the season he'd be having right now. Quickly supplanting as good as he is Daniel Tice in the starting lineup. But Mises has been awesome, and so you just bomb threes and have him crash the glass and hope that you get enough, plus variance 3-point percentage and a few putbacks when you don't get the threes to fall. And so I think that's the pathway. Along with I think DeJounte's got to set the tone early on. Again, I mean, I think he's got to have defenses like kind of bending towards him and to create some open 3-point looks, or else it's going to be tough sledding for the Pelicans tonight.
The chat is saying that apparently I said that the Knicks don't give up a ton of threes. I meant exactly the opposite. They give up a ton of threes. They don't give up a lot of shots at the rim. It's basically build a good first line, and then, hopefully Cat isn't taking advantage of too much. Look, the Knicks made 2 blockbuster trades this offseason, Mason, and we were shocked by both of them when they happened, especially since one was with the Knicks and one was with the Nets, the team they haven't made a trade with since 1983, and the other being the Cat trade that had just been rumored forever, and then the trigger was finally pulled. What was your reaction when the Knicks made these 2 trades? And that like, be as honest as possible. Like, did you think that put them over the top into contender status?
Yeah, and I think I flipped you up. I was looking at Clean the Glass earlier today, but with the Knicks profile, and I think I flipped the rim versus 3. I was like, they're good. Would have wanted that the other, but yeah. So I thought that the talent trade was awesome for you guys. Like I was like, as a Wolves fan, I would have been furious. Like that. I mean, it was an economical trade. Let's just call it that.
I was going to say, Mason, I don't know if you've checked out Wolves Reddit lately, but they are furious. It's
a dark place.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, it's like you got Ant in your prime and you that's the move. Like it. Yeah. I don't know. It was,
you said again, it was economical. It wasn't a basketball decision. It was an economical decision.
Yeah. So I thought it was awesome for the Knicks. And look, I get once you're there, go all in. And if you think Bridges is the right guy for that, I guess that can be debated. Hindsight's 2020, right? And it's still early, very early to judge this trade.
Right.
But I liked it, and I was arguing with people that the Knicks starting 5. I was hearing that the Celtics are still like with their starting 5 will still run circles around the Knicks. It's like maybe continuity wise, sure, but as for pure talent and the way the skill sets fit together, I think there's an argument there if they can get enough kind of reps together. And mesh. But I mean, obviously the Celts still have they've been playing together for a long time, those 5, but I mean that starting 5, in theory, it should work a little bit better than it has so far, but give it time.
I think you're preaching patience is the most important thing we're doing right now at Knicks Film School. And
in the East, you have time.
Well, that's the thing. Like this quote unquote slow start, they're 11-8 right now in the 4th seed. If you care about seeding this early in the season. And it's not like they got off to the start Milwaukee that got to. It's not like they got off to the start Philly has gotten off to. They're still over 500, one of 5 teams in the conference over 500. So it's why I think that there's the glass half empty, which is like, did we give up 5 picks for this guy? And it's going to help start a dynasty for little brother over in Brooklyn. And then there's the glass half full. That's like, look how awesome their offenses looked so far this year. And like, look at what Cat looks like having the best year of his career, arguably from an efficiency standpoint. Jalen Brunson's been awesome. Josh Hart is a 2-point machine from his 2-point percentage. Like Anunoby is getting all-star conversations. And it's like, just wait for Mikal Bridges to figure it out. And what is this going to look like when that happens? So I'm hoping to remain half full. The Charlotte game that the Knicks are coming off of was, and I saw you on Blue Sky. You were watching it, so like
I was watching it.
It was a concerning afternoon. I'll say that, Mason.
The weirdest thing about that whole game was the halftime show. But
yes, well, yes. For those who didn't see on League Pass, please go watch it. It was very weird. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I get it. But also take this from a Pelicans fan. Trading for durability should not be overlooked. Mikal Bridges is the pinnacle in the NBA of not missing time with injuries and having a consecutive games played streak that he does. So, at minimum, even if you're getting underwhelming play from Bridges, you're getting 75 plus to 82 games of that. And so
Yeah.
that matters. But yeah, I think they'll be, the Knicks will be fine.
I hope so. I genuinely hope so. And in this matchup today, look, I can't believe I'm actually going to pivot to an Elfrid Payton question, but it did not end well for him here in New York. And he played a ton of games, became a pariah because he was the I forget what player in Chicago he represents, but Tibbs has this thing where he like builds a great second unit, wants it to stay in place, and he has like a fake starter that plays like 18 to 24 minutes. And then clearly Derrick Rose was coming off the bench to just play the rest of the game, like play starters minutes, but he wanted to keep that second unit in place. So Elfrid Payton was starting at at point guard for the Knicks throughout that entire We Here season. And come playoff time, it was like, all right, now we're going to get rid of this. And he got benched in game 2 and never played another minute for the Knicks that season. And I mean, he had 20 plus assists the other night. So I mean, how productive has Elfrid Payton been? Is this like just because they need bodies he's playing? Like what can Knicks fans expect, especially if on the return of Elfrid Payton to Madison Square Garden tonight?
Probably
I know
not
you didn't
much.
expect to ever get an Elfrid Payton question, but you got one here at Knicks Film School.
Well, yeah, I mean, he had 21 assists the other night, but that was the game I think before DeJounte came back, and so now that DeJounte's back in the starting lineup, I mean, Payton, that type of player, and I think part of the he thrives by playing with good players around him, right? And so Elfrid Payton playing with the second unit, not exactly as enticing as playing alongside a bunch of talented starters where he can where guys can really make shots that he creates for him. So I don't expect anything close to what we saw from him the other night with the 20 plus assists, unless more injuries at the Pelicans and he's forced to start again.
I am very curious to see. It's really from a Knicks perspective, the effort that comes out against the shorthanded Pelicans team, and just being back home, whether that ignites something in this team that really sleepwalked through their day after Thanksgiving game. I'm going to go to my live chat, go to my audience, and ask you some questions before we get out of here. We start with Kevin. Thank you, Kevin, for your question. My question from Kevin Hun. I'll hopefully pronounce your name right, Kevin. My question is, how desperate are the Pelicans wanting a big, and would they be interested in dealing with the Knicks? Obviously, Mitchell Robinson being from the New Orleans area, although he does live in Nashville now, which geography-wise isn't super far away from New Orleans, especially when you compare it to New York. How desperate are the Pelicans for a big, and could the Knicks be a trade partner?
I mean, before the season, I would have said, potentially, and then I've just been looking over at Portland, like Robert Williams, just looking at guys who maybe you can get at a discount to basically be better than Daniel Tice as Messi starts to get integrated. But both two unexpected things have happened. The Pelicans have been even more injured than you'd expect, and I expect a lot typically, and Messi's been way better than we expected. So I don't think the Pelicans are going to rush to make a move for a big in the way that maybe we thought they might have before the season, because I mean, Brandon Ingram for a big man, like something, maybe Brandon Ingram for a big and picks or something was a common kind of construct, whether it was like John Collins from Utah or something like that. But at this point, again, given the fact that they're at the bottom of the Western Conference because of all these injuries, they're not going to rush to trade for a big just because it's a missing piece, especially given how good Messi's been.
Kevin clarified in the comments, my last name is pronounced like the word win, but with an H at the front. So Quinn, thank you, Kevin, for your question. We appreciate you watching live on the Knicks Film School pregame pod. From Dirty Dancer, will Brandon Boston be in the rotation when guys get healthy?
If you can tell me when that's going to be, I would love to know. He's well been another. Yeah, I mean, he's been another fairly pleasant surprise. I mean, he had a great first week or two, and then, hasn't played quite as well. I think he's shown enough chops on both sides of the ball to at least, is almost like their discount kind of Najee Marshall type guy who they traded or they let walk to Dallas last year, understandably so. But maybe fringe rotation, but I don't know if whenever this team that you speak of is fully healthy, I'm not sure there are minutes for him. But I have been, he's kind of in the number 2 as far as unexpected, impressive players, the Pelicans behind Messi.
Well, speaking of unexpected players that have happened really throughout this season, we got to go to Dyson Daniels, and Ben Kim Gervey has a question. Does Dyson Daniels breakout surprise you? Does New Orleans develop talent?
So he's always been a defensive menace. That does not surprise me at all. I think folks should go and kind of check his numbers on the season overall and see how different they are offensively than what they were in New Orleans. He had a few really incredible games offensively for Atlanta this year. His splits, I mean, I haven't checked in the last day or two, but as recently as a week ago, they're very, very similar to what they like on a per 36-minute basis as to what they are in New Orleans. And so I think Dyson he's a great defender. I'm rooting for him, and I think there's a pathway to him being pretty good. But at the same time, he doesn't shoot the ball well from three, from free throws. He's relying a lot on his floater game, which is awesome. But I think it's going to be a difficult pathway for him to be really a plus offensive player or efficient player. That said, the pairing with Trey has been great. I mean, I think it made a lot of sense at the time, and it still does. But I'm not sure he's having quite the breakout year as people may be thinking, just because he had a 4 or 5 game stretch that was awesome on the offensive side.
An outstanding nickname, by the way. The Great Barrier Thief is good. Brilliant. The Great Barrier Thief is up there with like the Dream, or just like the Greek Freak, or Magic. Like that's how much I love that nickname. So shout out to whoever came up with that nickname. 2 questions from Jessica Elsner. First one, what do you hope happens with Zion? Mason has frozen. Hopefully get him back in just a second. Mason, do you hear me? Mason, do you hear me?
The mere mention of Zion freezes up my
clearly. So that's... All right. So what do you hope happens with Zion?
I hope he comes back in a week and is the Zion of old, and the Pelicans can stick with him and not and really kind of focus their efforts on an Ingram trade and continue to ride it out with Zion. But because I don't hope they trade him. I mean, that is pretty much saying we are starting over and just kind of focusing on the young guys and closing the book on this version of the Pelicans. And so I mean, he's been phenomenal when he's been healthy, and so there isn't a lot of clarity around his timeline right now. Shams had a report, but it doesn't sound like there was a ton of corroboration there in the New Orleans side, specifically because it just doesn't seem like they saw eye to eye. They don't know really where that came from, but I don't know. No one knows when Zion's coming back. Like if you told me he was starting to practice in 3 days and he was back in a week and a half, wouldn't be surprised. Or if you told me he was out till the new year, also wouldn't be surprised. So I want him to get healthy. I want him to play basketball for New Orleans, but I guess it's even hard to conceive of a possible pathway to trading him at this point, just because I have no idea what the market's going to look like.
If I can ask a follow up to Jessica's question, because it's interesting when you're a fan and watching this, and like the attachment you build with a player that you've drafted, and like Knicks fans went through this with RJ and with Quickly, where it was when the trade was made, it was an understanding of the business. Like they probably did get better.
Josh Hart for New Orleans too. I mean, he didn't draft him, but the fan base really rallied behind him. So reasons you can expect. There's
like an emotional attachment that's like, I want my team to be good. I want my team to get better, but I'm hoping they figure it out. And when they're in the playoffs winning games, it's with these people. Like I'm just gonna go to baseball for a second, and like I'm a Mets fan, and Pete Alonso's a free agent. I will understand if the Mets move on from him because there are better first basemen available. I also would like the Mets to eventually achieve like the mountaintop and reach that with him because of the attachment that I grew with. And I'm wondering how much of that exists with Pelicans fans, where there may be like a smart basketball decision or business decision to move on, but is there an attachment to it, the fan base or you tell me what the split is that's like, no, I want them to figure it out with Zion. I believe in Zion. I'm attached
to Zion? I think a prerequisite for those types of thoughts are availability for the player. Like we in our pod like a couple years ago when Kevin Durant was on the trade market before, I think it was when he was in Brooklyn before he went to Phoenix. Pelicans fans would not trade Herb Jones for Kevin Durant. Like I'm not kidding you. Like there are plenty of fans who would not do that. And like, look, the age, you can make the age argument, but like if you can land a guy like KD in New Orleans, you freaking do it. And so
listen, I come from the world of I wouldn't trade like Frank Ntilikina for CP3 right before CP3 led the Suns to an NBA final. So I get it, believe me.
But so the thing is, like, so there are a lot allegiances to players like Herb on this team. But with Zion, it's waned over time because he just hasn't been on the floor. And so I don't think there'd be a ton of fans. I mean, obviously, if they make a trade and the trade looks like crap because, Zion isn't healthy, and so he's not going to reach, to your point earlier, he's not going to fetch the return you might expect for peak Zion. But I think most of the fan base would understand because he's been out for more than he's played. And so that was not the case with AD. I mean, we talked about AD's injury history, but he was still on the floor more than he wasn't. And so
right.
I think that was a little bit of a different feeling than what's going on with Zion.
Gotcha. And then another question from Jessica about your mascot. Do you think your mascot is the scariest one? Side question. Did you enjoy Zach Lowe talking about the history of your mascot back when he had a show? While you answer that, I'm just going to find a picture of the mascot for people watching.
Which one?
They can see. Oh, so Jessica, there's apparently more than one. You'd have to clarify.
Well, there's old Scary Pierre, which I assume was what she's talking about, but there's also the King Cake Baby mascot, which until recently was my daughter broke my King Cake Baby bobblehead, and so I'm not too happy about that. But she's 2. It happens. But so there are two scary. The old Scary Pierre, which I thought they never should have lost. Like that thing was, created nightmares. And then there's the holiday season. The King Cake Baby mascot comes out. That's equally scary.
So I'm looking at it now. There's one with a red bill, and then they changed it to one with a yellow bill. Am I off on that? Is that the old one?
Yeah, I mean, if it looks like the stuff of nightmares, and that's the old one.
So if it looks like a pelican, that is okay. This is what I'm looking at right now. Okay.
Yep.
Those listening, there's a pelican that looks like his just looks very scary, and then one that looks more happy. It's remember the Knicks traded for Malachi Flynn at one point last year. And someone made the joke on Twitter that he looked like evil Dante DiVincenzo. And so we called him Evil Dante. And so like him next, it was basically, this is what we got. We've got, what's this mascot's name?
Pierre.
So we've got Pierre and Evil Pierre on the screen at the moment in the same spirit of Evil Dante. And then last but not least, I'm just going to respond to something. Dirty Dancer. Moving on from Pete Alonso means they probably got Soto, so I want him gone. Dirty Dancer, Steve Cohen has unlimited money. So my answer to that response is both. Okay, if you get Juan Soto, you get both. Okay, that shouldn't end the offseason, in my opinion.
Yeah, but Yankees fan rebellion if that happens.
Well, listen, I'm starting to prepare for it because all the reports are that. And look, this is not going to turn into a baseball podcast because I agree with you. It would be a Yankees fan rebellion. I just don't think Steve Cohen will be outbid. I think his bid will be $50 million more than whatever is offered. But we will see what happens in the baseball world in a different podcast and a different conversation. Mason, thank you so much for joining me for this edition of the Knicks Film School pregame show. I always appreciate your contributions, and the In the Know podcast is outstanding. Before you get out of here, please let the fine folks at home know where they could find you and all the work you do.
Yeah. So I'm limited to just podcasting these days, but I've recently left Twitter entirely, but you can find me on Blue Sky. Just my name is at Mason Ginsberg, and then the podcast is just at In the Know NO. So yeah, we're recording weekly at this point. Well, we skipped this weekend. We're just overall the wheels are coming off the bus, and we just need to take a reset. And so, but generally just podcasting weekly with the Pelicans. A lot of off the court news. Hopefully, we can start talking about on the court stuff more in the near future. Very symbolic after our conversation spent the first 15 minutes talking about non-basketball stuff.
Understood.
So that's life these days.
Believe me, understood. Knicks Film School's first real year of podcasting before I got here was during the 17-win season that eventually led to RJ Barrett. But if you remember, they traded Porzingis that year, and then for 6 months, it was, oh, they're getting Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and they're going to draft Zion Williamson. And they ended up with RJ Barrett, Julius Randle, Taj Gibson, Elfrid Payton, Reggie Bullock, and a bunch of power forwards. So I get it. Believe me, I get it. It's going to be a lot of transactional talk if the team is headed that direction. By the way, I did this today. Subscribe to In the Know on Substack. I found you guys on Substack. So if you're listening to this, we're obviously supporters of Substack with the Knicks Film School newsletter being there. So check out the In the Know podcast on Substack if you can. The link is in the description of this episode. Mason, you be good. Thank you so much for joining me. And thank you to everybody who tuned in for this episode of the Knicks Film School pregame show. If you dug it, please head over to iTunes, drop a 5-star rating and a review. If you're watching or tuning in live, please like this video. Remember to subscribe. I will be back on Tuesday previewing the Knicks matchup against the Orlando Magic, a pivotal NBA Cup game against the Orlando Magic. Winner of that game wins their group. So tune in for that. But until next time, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Enjoy the game tonight, and I will speak with you soon.